Morning all. I had my first over the board match of the season last night. It was in a cup match, Barnet versus Royston. I think the Ryder Cup. P.Rice is like 172 ECF, so I'm slightly higher ECF at 197. I played knight f3, non-committal Re8 opening actually. After knight f6, I played c4, so English opening transposition. After g6, knight c3. So I wasn't sure whether to go into a mainline King's Engine after bishop g7 by trying to like play e4 and d4. The reason is I'm not really convinced in mainline King's Engine that it suits my style to sort of be on the receiving end of a kingside attack. But I had two ideas in mind: either the bishop e3 system, perhaps, or another system, the Shirov system with g4 later. So I wasn't too worried. I suppose it rules out the Simish system with f3, given that knight's on f3. It's the only thing ruled out. So actually, I thought the other way is just to carry on as if it's just an English opening. So I just played g3 actually, which could go back into a King's Engine fianchetto system. But actually now, instead of committing the d pawn, he plays actually c5. What's bishop g2, knight c6. So it's a sort of King's Engine-ish position without d6. We both castle, and now I played d4. And if cd, I think I can get a small edge after knight d4, pressure on the d file, and I was looking forward to that a little bit. But here he plays the move d6, which I suppose invites a boring continuation with d takes and maybe queen takes and maybe a bit of pressure. But I think black should be able to equalise with careful play, perhaps. But I did have a look at bishop e3 and knight d7 and rook d1. Let's have a quick check of this. I think this is just an old system. So actually d5 is given as one of the stronger moves. Takes. If white tries to be too forceful, I think it gets too simplified. Well, here bishop e6, there's no need to play knight d7 and rook d1, that would be a bit passive in white's favour. But here, if black counters with bishop e6, then it's going to be about equal or even better for black, according to this. So let's go back. So I think I played a reasonable move, d5. His knight goes to the rim. Knight in the rim is dim, but actually here it's doesn't look too bad if it's followed up with like a6 and b5 later. c4 is like continual target, and my queen side development is a bit congested if I have to play knight d2. However, I thought it was a good idea to play knight d2 here. So knight d2, a6. Now I'm not sure about this next move, a4. I am clamping down on b5, but there's another slight problem with a4, tactically actually, that if black later can reroute another knight here, then maybe knight takes c4 gets to be on the cards. If I'm following up a4 with rook a3, then a knight sacrifice here would mean like b5, b4 would be dangerous. It's just a dynamic thing to consider, that a4, if the idea is rook a3, I'm going to be leaving a tactical vulnerability potentially. But other than that, it still seemed attractive to bind down against b5. So he plays rook b8 as if b5 is going to be a possibility for black later. Now I sort of play to gain space in the centre. I play e4, and he plays knight g4, which I kind of like my position because I'm pushing the knight back now again. Well, here to e5, but I will be playing f4. So after queen e2, I'm protecting c4 with the idea that f4, and I'll start to unravel surely. But you know, if he plays G5, he's weakening his king side. It looks as though I'll play F4 anyway. The only slight thing that I considered there was actually that, you know, maybe my light square bishop is sensitive to knight h4s here, but I don't think that's a major problem. Maybe just rook f2 if knight h4, bishop h1. Actually here rook f2, bishop d4. So no, there's still some dynamism for black here, but I wonder actually g5. Let's just check that then. g5, what would be a good way for white to continue? Actually g5 is given as a slight advantage to black with f4 making the position worse actually for white after this. Yeah, because if I give black e5, that would be like massive dark square control. So g5 might actually be a good move here. Other moves: queen b6, queen c7, knight d7. Okay. So he plays f5, which maybe is not a good move then, because I'm able to kick that knight for the nice e5 square. Now play e takes, putting pressure on the e file, and I think I'm slightly better now. Bishop takes, g4, and for a while he's considering bishop c2, but I think the bishop is just a tactical vulnerability on c2, although it might support knight b3s. Maybe I just play rook a3s, cover that b3 square. And he was also concerned about e6 being slightly weakened, so he actually retreated the bishop to d7. I play rook a3 anyway now, because I have the idea that maybe in the future I'll be able to move the knight and get the rook over and then play f5. Plays rook e8, and I don't want him to liberate with e6. And here, so I make this crucial decision of inviting two of these pieces to key dark squares in the position here and here, actually, by playing this f5 move, which keeps a bind also, of course, on e6. So the two pieces come in, first a check, and then after the knight e5. The problem is this bishop is potentially a target, but it's working out how to get at that bishop, because at the moment black is tactically putting pressure on c4. So and also actually this is where there's also a menacing threat potentially of taking on c4 for queen c4 and b5 b4 to be played, you know, getting a tempo on the queen if the queen is on c4. Thankfully here I come up accidentally, I think, with a good move, almost, well, because I have another, I didn't even actually see this knight c4. I was looking at just getting rid of this key piece, because I thought this key piece is holding together actually the black king safety. Imagine that's removed and this bishop on the diagonal, like in yesterday's post-mortem analysis, a bishop cutting across the diagonal, but also in one of the wins yesterday in 5-minute chess. If you can get a bishop cutting across the diagonal, especially with weakened dark squares here, this is going to be great for white. So there's a move actually which triggers off trying to hijack this diagonal, but my follow-up isn't quite accurate, but I get away with it anyway. If I give you 10 seconds, I wonder if you can find the move which will help eliminate this key piece. So the strategy is trying to exploit weakened dark squares around the king here, but how do you try and remove this key piece? So if I give you 10 seconds starting from now, what key move would you play here? So 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, I played the move queen e4, and we realised how strong it is after, because it's also bypassing these knight takes c4, you know, this knight c4 idea, where the queen would be a tactical target, putting pressure on g6 as well for fgs, and it's prompting black to actually play g takes, which actually exposes black king potentially on the g file from a rook coming across to the g file, either of these rooks. So it's actually prompting this next move, g takes, and after g takes, now black takes on c4, so I'm a pawn down. And technically, actually, the best move here, which I missed, is actually to first capture on c4 to get rid of one pair of knights, even though it looks a bit counterintuitive, perhaps, because the idea was, you know, to play knight e2 to take here. But actually, it turns out in this position that knight takes c4 is the strongest. Okay, how do we do this? I could first show you what I played, or we could look at knight c4 now. Let's add an engine kibitzer just to confirm this position. Knight takes c4, knight takes c4, and here knight e2 is very powerful, offering the exchange up. Say knight takes a3, then the key piece is removed, and say cd, this would be a disaster now. It would be a mate in 7 actually, with bishop h6, which shows just how weakened the black king is, that there's actually now technically a mate in 7, because there's a key threat of queen g4. So say king f7, f6, threat of queen h7. It's a total disaster for black. So here, queen d4. This shows diagonal getting torn to bits. Forced mate. I'm just showing you a forced mate there. But unfortunately, I had, you know, intuitively, I was thinking I wanted to keep the knight on e5. You know, from preventing the bishop going backwards. So I had the same idea, but the implementation not as hot. The thing is, there aren't too many alternatives actually after knight takes c4. Here, knight e2. What does black actually play here? If, say, bishop g7, the knight is actually on pre here, queen c4. If knight e5, then of course I take that key piece, queen d4, and this blockade on the diagonal won't last too long after bishop f4. Remember, there's rook g3 coming in. So say rook f6 as an example, check, and now the diagonal, maybe bishop takes e5, no, but maybe actually more incisive. There are other more incisive moves like bishop g5 apparently. So say the rook moves here, it would be a disaster, I think, with okay, rook e1 threatens rook e5. So this diagonal is getting absolutely dangerous for black in this variation. So that's why, okay, so I hope you're convinced that knight takes c4 is technically the strongest move, and why. But I played actually knight e2, and here actually, despite our optimistic post-mortem analysis, it seems black can survive if he has accepted my exchange sack by playing knight takes a3. So after, say, knight takes d4, this isn't that dangerous for black. Well, here apparently there's a resource knight c2 anyway, and black's going to be able to survive this apparently, according to this brief analysis. So somehow I was fortunate. He chickened out of winning the exchange here. He was just a bit too concerned. Maybe best is just taking here, because the bishop's still trapped on d4 unless it can go to a1. I don't think so. Knight b3. So say actually this position, it seems the evaluation for white might be creeping up a little bit. So here, bishop b2. This is what we're looking at in post-mortem with John Piggott, who's got like 2 IM norms. So bishop takes d4, and John was saying as though this is really dangerous for black, but actually I don't know, the engine, well, it's coming down actually, the evaluation advantage for black to minus 0.61. It's coming down, so that there's definite compensation on the G file, but it's certainly not as clear as the other continuation with the immediate knight takes c4. So white's trumps, you know, the G file and the diagonal, but say takes here, and if it takes here queen c7, black's got some play here, but it's still potentially a little bit dangerous, as if black has to resort to resources like this. Okay, it's getting to like minus 0.45 now. So okay, but definitely knight takes c4 was a stronger continuation. Here though, he kind of went really badly wrong though, so he didn't want to win that exchange and be greedy for the exchange. He actually took on d2, which doesn't solve the d4 problem. White's clearly in the driving seat now after bishop takes. He plays bishop takes b2, which doesn't help matters much. After rook b3, I'm gaining that dark square bishop, and we're sort of strangely heading it into that topic area of post-mortem analysis of this bishop being free across the diagonal. Maybe it is a common winning attacking theme, but it seems to be popping up a lot in the last day, more than I remember ever before, this theme of a bishop on the diagonal. So he loses his important defensive bishop on the diagonal. In fact, he gives it up here. He doesn't want to face bishop d4, which maybe he should have done. Bishop d4, it's going to be quite bad for black across the diagonal and the G file here. After bishop h6, nasty threats are emerging. Rook e3 here, and this idea of sacking the exchange, just to emphasize the diagonal, is on the cards now, and black is going to be collapsing here pretty soon. So rook e5, say, and he has to give up the queen soon if he's not careful. So like here, giving up the queen is the best move. So really, that shows how disastrous this is. He gives up the bishop actually. It's a piece sack now. So I'm happy now materially as well. For 3 pawns, I've got a piece, an important piece. I've still got my bishop pair. I've got the G file. I've got this bind on e6. I love my position. He plays bishop b5. I simply put the bishop on diagonal, protecting the knight even more, and also it was protected by the queen. Attacks my queen. I move it to a good square. h4. Engine doesn't mind that at all. That move, queen h4. So there's lots of threats that generates. King h8. Okay, I play move which I think emphasizes the G file, knight f4, but maybe it's not technically the best, but still it's given them huge advantage in any case. If he takes here, then actually knight g6 is apparently really crushing. So say knight takes e5, bishop takes e5. You get the idea again that I don't even have to recapture here, because I'm taking on g2 with check. Is king's got nothing defending it, absolutely nothing defending it. So say bishop takes f1 here, even if he didn't do anything. Slight small inconvenience of the check, and then you have to give up the queen. So he's in a bad state here after knight f4. He plays bishop takes f5. I play rook e2, which I think is a logical move, but actually yeah, the evaluation creeps up here, but there were apparently more crushing moves like knight e6, or just taking apparently, and then knight e6. because if bishop takes, now there's bishop e4. I didn't see this variation particularly. I just thought I was winning anyway. It's getting pretty bad for h7 and the king safety in general. So I played what looked to be logical continuation, rook e2, still big advantage for white. So he plays e6. Now I play actually one of the engine recommended moves. Actually, my queen's attacked. Where do I want the queen? I move it to h6 actually, because I'm thinking knight h5 on g7, also putting lateral pressure on e6. So he defends here with queen e7, and I crash through on the diagonal now, just like the post-mortem analysis of yesterday, ironically. So rook takes e5. After takes, check, huge bishop, and I play a move which seemed kind of neat, but maybe not the most incisive, maybe not needed. Apparently just rook g1 is absolutely like crushing, you know, on the g file, not minding ed, because you know, bishop d5 anyway, so ed is not really a threat. I played d6 as a kind of luxury move anyway, but now we're reaching a situation, it's a forced mate in 6. It's that g file, he can't do anything with that huge bishop cutting across his king. The queen's cutting off f8. We've got a sort of position resembling a key position in yesterday's post-mortem analysis. So I'm hoping, in terms of revision, this, you know, if you were preparing for an exam, you wanted to revise something, it's good to revise it like the next day sometimes. So I hope this theme is totally being reinforced for all of you that saw yesterday's video and game. This theme of the bishop cutting across the king's side like this. But here, you know, the g file is just end of game for black now after bishop f3. He's playing rook g1. He plays on a little bit, and after bishop g6 I just play rook g1, and actually here he leaves a mate in 1, which I was carried away with my plan, you see, though. Here after rook g1 I had the idea that I'm going to play takes and mate him over here, and I didn't spot actually the mate in 1 he just left. I just played rook takes g6, carrying on with my previous calculation, not as efficient, and I even played check here, not queen g7 again, just carry on with my previous calculation, knowing that if the queen moves there's this queen g7 anyway. So queen g7 mate. He was looking forward to optimistically, well, if I blundered with knight takes g6, then he'd have queen takes f3 check. That would be throwing away. Well, apparently it's still a mate in 7 after king h2. It's still totally winning, because actually the queen cannot take on e5 because the knight's protecting it. So this is apparently a mate in 5 as well. He'd have to give up the queen. So even if I went wrong, it would still be winning. So it was quite crushing in the end. So maybe it's sort of instructive for the theme of this bishop cutting across the diagonal. So let's have a look at that again, this game. So basically a king's engine where he put a knight on the rim to get pressure on c4, and that pressure on c4 and the knight on the rim gave me, well, it seemed to give me a free hand in the centre, but he could have played perhaps the unusual looking g5, so the knight would be given actually retreat to g6. Maybe it's not as bad as it seems, this idea at all actually. g5, we could breathe new life into this variation if this was an older variation. But f5 is giving, I think, white an advantage now after f4. E takes. I would say I would expect the engine to be giving white an advantage here. Well, it's about equal still. So apparently bishop c2 was a good move, and after bishop d7 now I'm getting an advantage. Rook a3 is actually given as a recommended engine move here. Rook e8, and now
actually it's liking black here still in this position. Now it's about equal, so it's a very complicated position even for engines, this position here. But this Queen E4 move seems to be very, very powerful, with a very simple idea to hijack this diagonal already by making available the E2 square for this maneuver knight E2 takes D4. So once that key defensive piece is removed, and especially with the G file being emphasized, because he wants to also resolve this FG problem, I just get a huge attacking position. But it was played slightly inaccurately. I should have taken on C4, not minding giving the bishop an escape road back, because apparently that really is absolutely crushing to play knight e2 after that. There's no escape road back because the queen c4 anyway. So this was an inaccuracy, but fortunately he chickened out of winning the exchange. So he took on d2, and after bishop takes d2, bishop b2, I'm looking forward to getting rid of his key dark square bishop. It's really happening now. So he plays as a piece sack, and it's just very easy now to just use the G file and the diagonal. Of course, I've got lots of attacking bits against his king here lurking around, and his defensive resources have been a bit cut off, and without the dark square bishop, black's really had it here. I just have to emphasize the diagonal, which I do with this exchange sack, and it's really just end of game. So I hope this theme's really been reinforced between today and yesterday. It certainly has for me, and I'm going to be looking out for this theme of the bishop cutting across the diagonal more and more, I hope, in my attacking games in the future. If I sound a bit tired, by the way, it's because it's like 5 in the morning here. I didn't really sleep very well so far after the game. So okay, comments or questions or YouTube, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the King's Crusher channel. It's free and you'll be notified of any new videos. There's 2 other very exciting games in the match which I'll also do videos of shortly. Okay, thanks very much.